Firstly, I would like to thank Adam, Adam, for kindly explaining to people why the Big Bang is unscientific. Um, I've been reading, comments and keeping silent because I don't want to interfere too much. But Big Bang is something that's been around for so many years, and it's hard. It's hard for some people to let go of it, and I guess kindly explaining to them, I emphasize kindly, because people, they get their feelings hurt when they realize that they've been, misled for so many years, that the Big Bang has just been what I would like to call a filler theory, a filler hypothesis. It's something that we all sort of accept without extreme criticism. We just, oh, it's the Big Bang, and everybody just goes over there, and that's what everybody accepts. But when it's critically examined, it just sort of falls apart. And it was mainly defended because it was the ideal of standardizing astronomy into, one specific worldview, so everybody could all learn the same things in their graduate schools and their colleges and whatnot. But we can move past that now. I think it's time. This paper, Stellar Metamorphosis, Correction of Radiometric Dating Assumptions of Solar System Formation, addressing radio-geocentrism. Now, I don't want to go over this whole paper. It basically, what it addresses is the idea that when astronomers and geologists were trying to figure out how old the Earth was, they were like, crap, It went from the young Earth creationism, which was 6,000 years old, and then it went to Kelvin's 30 million years old, and then it went up to another guy, I can't remember what his name was 500 million years old, and then it went up to another guy who went 4.5 billion years old, and then it just sort of went, it stayed there on a plateau of 4.5 billion years old. And that was simultaneous with them trying to figure out how planets form. So they were like, shit, how do planets form? Sorry for cussing. And the idea was the sun, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, that they all formed in a single disk, and that disk spread out as the planets were coalescing together, which means they had to have formed all at the same time. And that is the idea. That being said, that idea was accepted before they figured out that the Earth was extremely ancient, meaning they had the sun as being however old the Earth was. So when they figured out how old the Earth was, and they kept on getting pushed further and further and further back, from 6,000 years old to 30 million years old to 500 million years old to 4.5 billion years old, they had realized, it's like, wait a second, the Earth is freakishly old. That means all the other objects in the solar system are also freakishly old. The sun has to be at least 4.5 billion. Mercury is 4.5 billion. Venus is 4.5 billion. Jupiter is 4.5 billion. Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, Pluto, Ceres, every single moon around every single object is all 4.5 billion years old. And it doesn't take much to realize that that was a very flawed viewpoint, because it meant that we were placing a predetermined age on all the objects that are in the solar system based on the Earth's age. So we said the Earth is this old, all the objects that are in the solar system are the same age as the Earth, give or take 1 million or 2 years. That, in essence, is what radio-geocentrism is. It's the belief that the solar system and the objects in the solar system are all the same age as the Earth, give or take a couple million years here and there. And what that means is it kind of mimics the geocentrism of Ptolemy, where he believed that and Aristotle, of the Earth being the center and all the other objects, the wandering stars, the planets, including the sun, mind you, the sun was considered a planet, all orbited the Earth. So we placed the Earth as the center, and that's what all the objects orbited. Now, that's geocentrism. Eventually, we came to our senses and we realized that the Earth isn't the center. It's the sun that's the center of the system for the most part. And all the other objects orbit the sun, including the Earth. That made it heliocentrism. Now, with radio-geocentrism, the big difference is the Earth cannot be used to date all the other objects in the solar system. We can't use the radiometric samples found on the Earth and then weigh them against all the other objects and then force them to fit the same age as the Earth based on what their radiometric samples are telling us, or their radioisotopes are telling us, based off of the different fractions of lead to uranium, different fractions of potassium to there's another method there for dating. I can't remember all of them. There's so many things to memorize here, but basically, in a nutshell, is that when you take the Earth, you can't sit here and say the Earth is an age, all the other objects in the solar system are the same age. No. If we're gonna have the pure sample to measure the isotopic abundances of the radiometric samples that we have from the solar system, we have to take the most pure samples. And the most pure samples, the earliest samples we have to give a more accurate analysis of the Earth, of Mercury, of Venus, of Jupiter, of Saturn, is the sun. Unfortunately, what's happened is the protoplanetary disk nebula hypothesis has been accepted for so long that we have invented a system for the sun to be as old as the Earth, but it was never needed. You see, the fusion model of the sun was invented because they figured out that the Earth was really freaking old, so they were like looking at the sun thinking, crap, the Kelvin-Helmholtz mechanism, where the gravitational collapse of the star creates heat and radiates away, means the sun can max be a couple tens of millions of years old. They were like, that can't be true. We have to have some other mechanism to keep the sun extremely hot for really long periods of time. So they invented the fusion model, where hydrogen becomes helium, or I think it was heavy hydrogen becomes helium. I'm not too sure. And the fact is that whole paradigm of those models of fusion inside of stars was never true. They had invented it because they wanted the sun to be as old as the Earth. It was radio-geocentrism. They had figured out the Earth was really old, so they applied the Earth's age to all the objects in the solar system. But it was really, really unscientific to do that. They should have kept their options open. Because what that's led us to do is think that fusion is happening in the sun. When we take measurements of the sun, we try to mimic the sun's behaviors with earthly experiments, and we say, oh, well, this is how fusion works, because this is how we have it working inside the sun. It should be no wonder we don't have any working fusion reactors, because that's not how fusion works at all. They're completely wrong. And if they would just come to terms with the fact that the sun is not billions of years old like the Earth, it's very, very young. It's about 1/100th the age of the Earth. I would say at most, it's about 100 million years old at most. So if we want to have accurate radioisotope data, we have to send up another Genesis mission up there to collect more solar wind. And we have to take those measurements and use that as a 0 point for measuring everything else inside the solar system. Now, I know with uranium and the lead method, those are two very heavy elements, and not a lot of that is in the sun, but I'm pretty sure there's some trace amounts in there. So when we send up a second Genesis mission to collect solar wind, we have to make sure that the panels that collect this material are freaking huge. Think about like telescopes. We have larger and larger telescopes to collect more light, to study more of our galaxy. Same thing with the solar wind samples. We just send up a larger collecting array and we bring that material back, and then we use that to set a 0 point for all the other information that we've been collecting. But what that's going to need is a complete abandonment of the idea that the Earth is the same age as all the objects in the solar system, because Mercury is easily over 65 billion years old. Venus is easily over 25 billion years old. Earth is probably 10 billion. It's probably double what they're saying it is. And the meteorites that land, meteoroids, and then meteors, and then the meteorites when you find them on the ground. Those objects, those iron nickel objects are probably trillions of years old. We have no idea. And that being said, the sun is really young. Jupiter and Saturn are very young. Neptune and Uranus are really young. I mean, Neptune and Uranus are middle age, are around 2.1 billion years old. To look at these objects as being different ages is going to take a lot of self-examination and a lot of research. But it's going to happen eventually. All right, you guys, that's enough for this talk. I'll link this paper to the bottom of the page.